Hi, Country Changers. Great to be back with you. I have on the line with me Kerrin and Bianca Marshall, who work and live in Gundagai, where they moved to a few years ago. But I'll get them to share their story a little bit. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So tell me, when did you move to Gundagai and where from?
So we had a kind of a bit of a protracted move. We purchased a block of land here, I think in 2017, and we ended up settling on that about 12 months after. And then we went through the process. It was a large vacant block. Nothing had ever been built on it or anything. So we went through the process of putting a house on and getting everything kind of connected, which was a bit of an eye-opener. And then we ended up getting to move out here, was it June 2019, I think? Yeah, so been out here a bit over 3 years now.
And where did you move from?
I kind of want to say Wollongong.
We had a bit of time in Canberra in between, just while we were looking for the perfect block.
Yeah.
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 And it was just kind of spontaneous that we ended up in Gundagai. We were looking at a house, wasn't it, first?
Yeah, we were trying to look at a block of land that already had a house on it, and that fell through. But fortunately, there was another block that they hadn't really been ready to advertise yet that we got to see, I guess, before anybody else. And it was a much better fit for what we wanted. And we'd looked at a number of different blocks of land kind of in the more broader regional area of New South Wales, some closer to the coast, some inland. And we were finding, I think timing-wise, it was when a lot of people were deciding that that was something they wanted to do and make a change. So we were finding increasingly that the blocks that we were looking at had things that weren't right about them, or they were getting smaller and smaller, or we were just missing out. So yeah, we sort of happened upon what we thought was our perfect kind of block here. And yeah, it just felt really lovely here, Gundagai. We'd stopped through once when we had our eldest, on the way back from my wife's parents' place in Hay, and she'd had enough of the car by that stage. I think she was probably 5 months old, and the wiggles just weren't cutting it anymore, and no amount of renditions of the wheels on the bus would calm her down. So we spent the night here, and we just remembered that the town had a really lovely vibe about it.
So I love that story. It's sort of very organic, and we do hear a lot of people from the Canberra, Wollongong areas do make that country change. It sounded like you had something really particular in mind, but you were also fluid at the same time around, where you'd end up. What were you looking for, and why did you settle on Gundagai aside from the nice feeling of it?
We wanted space. I didn't really know exactly what I wanted the space for until we found this block. And I realized I wanted to be able to stand somewhere on our land and not be able to see the house. I wanted that feeling that you could kind of go off and wander around and enjoy it. And I guess initially we had these really sort of optimistic and probably unrealistic ideas of where we wanted to be, looking at really beautiful bush blocks and things online and imagining how awesome it would be, and having absolutely no concept of how important it would be to have access to services, where the nearest school was, where the nearest shops were, all of that sort of stuff. And I guess through a process of looking at different blocks of land, we started to get a little bit more realistic and kind of really discover what we did want. We wanted water if we could get it, and we've got a lovely little creek that runs through our block. We wanted somewhere that was going to be enough space for us to try and not be as reliant on buying our food and things like that, and somewhere where our kids could get a little bit of an idea of how that stuff works. Again, reality check, it's pretty out of control on a lot of the block at the moment, because once you have a little bit of space, you've got to be able to keep it under control. So that's been a reality check. But yeah, I guess we just sort of worked through places that weren't right. And then, yeah, when we came here, we knew that this was not like any block that we'd seen before for all the right reasons.
And I think like it's such a gem because it's so much space, but it's right in the middle of town. We're only a couple of blocks from the main street, and it's just such a good position.
So for those, what I might do is share my screen, which will show a map of the region. So we've got Cootamundra-Gundagai, which is an amalgamated council region here. And we've obviously got the Wollongong area where you've come from, Canberra where you've dabbled. And then we've got the inland cities of Wagga and Griffith not too far. So just tell me a little bit about the location and I guess why that made it ideal for you and many other country changers.
I don't know that necessarily we gave too much thought to accessibility. I think that's possibly one of the things that has been a little bit of an adjustment for us. Not having Bunnings 5 minutes down the road has made certain and it's that sort of stuff. You do sometimes feel like we're in a smaller town or a town that's further away than we are, because it takes a little bit of effort to go out and get some of those things that maybe we had grown used to having at our disposal. But I think that's also a plus, because your weekends and your days off don't revolve around things that end up being a cost. Having a bit of space probably makes it easier, but I find I'm much happier to spend my time here doing things at home and outside. Whereas at least Canberra especially, everything was just going somewhere and it was just spending money. And that's not something that we find here. I think, yeah, as long as we had a good school system and you could just get what you needed fairly close, I don't think we sort of gave too much thought to being...
Yeah, no, it just sort of came up, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because I know initially Kerrin said, what about Gundagai? And I thought, I'm not sure, because I grew up in a small town, so I knew what that was like, but Kerrin hadn't experienced that before, so I wasn't sure what that would be like for him. But you love it. You really love the community here is beautiful.
Yeah.
Such a plus.
And to put it into perspective, Hayes out here past Carrithul, in line just north of Deniliquin, a lot of people know Denny. So you've got the Hay Plains, you've got very different landscapes and much smaller communities. Adjusted to that, but what I find is you very quickly adapt to having to be a little bit more organized on your trips to town. I remember we used to freeze milk and we would just stock up on things and make sure there were backups, and also a backup generator in case the freezer went out. But you were just more organized, because Gundagai, I mean, I'm not sure exactly where in Gundy you're positioned, but Gundagai to Wagga is, from memory, 35-40 minutes, maybe a bit more.
Probably closer to an hour, I think. Yeah, all told, to get into Wagga. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got Canberra in the other direction, which is an hour and a half. My memory.
Yeah, hour and a half.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got these big sort of centres close by, but it's, as you say, it's not forcing you to have that city lifestyle where you just spend so much money because it's there, whereas you're sort of leaning back on activities that you might not do normally in those city regions. So what do you do from a lifestyle perspective? What are some of those activities that you like doing as a family? Because you've got 3 little ones as well. So I'm sure that helps space.
The park. There's a lot of trips to the park.
And there's a beautiful park. It was built just when we moved here too.
Yeah.
Right in the centre of town. It's such a good thing.
Yep. We're starting now to develop a bit of a social network of people that are in very similar sort of situations to us, with young kids, and so there's a lot of them are sort of spending time here of a weekday, because there's space here for the kids to kind of go feral. We like, I guess, getting out. We'll go to Tumut. There's some really beautiful walks and things around Tumut down along the river. There's a really lovely old gold mill ruins at Adelong, which is it's a super nice little river as well. So last summer we spent heaps of time swimming there with the kids, which was really nice too, like to get them swimming somewhere that wasn't a pool, because it's a bit of a different experience for them. And then we just kind of try and encourage them to engage with where we are on the block. Like there's a lot of space for them outside. There's heaps of different things for them to do. They can chase the ducks and the chooks. They get in the creek and do things that seem to be hardwired in little kids, which is good. Build dams out of rocks and things. So it's good to see the next generation still gravitates towards that sort of stuff when they're in the water and there's rocks around.
Oh, and we cannot forget the museums.
Yeah.
Our little boy loves museums, and we're fortunate we have a few around Gundagai, so on Fridays we just do the rounds. Yeah,
that's amazing. And look, I do love the Riverina and Murray regions for the rich history it has, and I find that every sort of township or village or shire has its very unique history, from bush rangers, gold rush, to, you know, the Chinese settlements, to the migrant communities that have come in and really influenced the flavors. That's one thing that you could literally spend every weekend in a different town across the Riverina Murray and have a very different experience. So I'm glad you touched on that cultural aspect. Tell me a little bit about the work, because obviously not everyone can retire. Most people still have to work. So what are the job opportunities in industry like in the Gundagai Cootamundra area?
I haven't ever found it to be too difficult. That was definitely a concern for us in moving out there, and I guess all out here. And that was probably the last of our hurdles. So we went through finding a block of land. We went through, you know, getting a house put on it, all of the stuff to do with, you know, the financial side of that, all of the work around turning something that had just been plonked on the block to something that you can live in, and everything. And then I guess it was, how do we facilitate the move financially? What am I going to do for work? And I originally moved out here working for my first time in the finance industry, and that was in Tumut, and that commute was fine. It's a sort of 25-minute drive. But I realised that that wasn't something that I wanted, and I went back to something I've done for a long time, which is make coffee. And we're very fortunate, I think, in Gundagai that because of its through traffic, because it's a stopover for a lot of people travelling between Sydney and Melbourne, we've got a very busy cafe in town, and I'm able to kind of put the skills that I have to good use there, and it's a stable, it's a long-term viable job. I think, I don't know, I think there's a mixture of probably people in town that maybe struggle to get work, but then there's a lot of businesses that struggle to get good employees as well. I think it is definitely difficult. I don't know whether or not that's the age of the people that want that work in the town. The young ones obviously go off and study or whatever, and maybe wanting to move out of town. So you've got a lot of people, I guess, from maybe their mid-20s through to their mid-40s, and the sort of just the job side of things maybe for them is hard to be motivated to do if it's just working at the shops, or if it's, you know, doing, you know, working in a cafe or whatever. There's definitely a lot of industry here, though. There's the meatworks here that employs an enormous amount of people, lots of trades and things like that. So yeah, I think it's a bustling little town in that regard, but I do think that employers of your sort of your shops, your hospitality clubs, pubs, they do find it difficult, I think, to get stable and good quality employees.
Yeah, one of the things that we hear a lot from across nearly every regional town in the country at the moment is that there is a skills shortage from sort of base level as well as that higher exec level. And I know the regions are crying out for more people, more staff, more skills, and bringing those skills, as you said, from other industries and looking at ways you could adapt that in a totally different sector. So, I mean, yours is a great example of that. And I know that council has lots of opportunities and very supportive of local businesses starting up, and, you know, particularly on the shop fronts of the road. So if people are interested in reaching out to anyone at council, we've got the Cootamundra-Gundagai page on the Facebook website, and you can scroll down. There's lots of information here, but you can also reach out to Casey Paulson from council, who will be able to, if you've got questions about, you know, the region, job opportunities, housing, want to have a discussion about potentially relocating a business as well as your family, she's a great person to reach out to, and she can connect you in with different people and give you a bit of a snapshot about the industry. But this page is a great little opportunity to sort of have a bit more of a deep dive around costs, climate, transport, the two different regions of Cootamundra and Gundagai. They're close by, but they are different townships under the same council. And obviously you've got more information about education, recreation, careers, etc., etc. And there's a great jobs platform called Jobs Riverina Murray, where people who are wanting a bit more information about the jobs out there can actually go and have a bit of a look themselves. But thank you so much for your time. Was there anything else that you wanted to add about your story, or any words of advice that you'd like to share with our Country Change viewers?
I don't think so. No, just I guess if you're tempted to it, and at least from our experience, it's fantastic. I think, especially at the moment, we're very fortunate that we don't have the same pressures, even though we're living with the same circumstances that people in the city might be facing with the cost of living. And I feel very fortunate that, you know, that's something we don't have to worry as much about. And I think that's a massive part of living in the regional towns, is it is just much more affordable, and the quality of life is fantastic.
And that was important to us too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To hear that someone would be at home raising the children, and it's allowed us to do that, just, you know, one income family. So that was important.
Yeah. And have you found the community for yourself? I know you said you've created a little bit of a gang of similar parents in similar situations, but how did you find, was that a concern for you moving into a new town where you didn't know anybody? And then were you worried about making those connections? How did you go about, I guess, fostering those new relationships you mentioned?
Well, we're so fortunate. It just sort of happened. I think coming here was right after COVID. COVID was just starting to die down a little. So we were in Canberra and we were so isolated, you know, no neighbour contact, nothing. Whereas here we were still isolated because you had to keep away from people. But just over the back fence, our beautiful neighbours, and you'd have a chat and you'd have a wave to them every day. Just made such a difference. And I feel people also gave us a lot when we came.
Yeah.
If there was something we thought of, like, oh, we should probably get chickens now, then, you know, a chicken coop would arrive. It's a lovely community. I just can't express how beautiful it is. Yeah,
and I guess it being, I guess, what you would call maybe city people, we don't have anywhere near the experience of the do-it-yourself, or at least we're developing that, but we certainly didn't to begin with. And there was a whole lot of different things that we needed to try and find somebody that could help us out with. And they were the people in the town that had the skills or could provide us with the help were so supportive of us coming out here and doing what we were doing. And then we found that in our way, we've been able to repay that as well. So we've got some people that we met through our back neighbours that live a little bit further up the road from us that have a couple of horses. The horses spend half their time on the block because we've got the space. They in turn help us out with keeping some stuff under wraps. Because of all the wet that we've had the last few years, we've had some issues with fences going down and stuff. They'll help us repair the fences. And they think that we're doing them this enormous favour looking after the horses. And we feel like we're having a massive favour done for us because it helps to keep it all under control. And that's the sort of community that we've found. And I guess in the back of your mind, you do worry coming out to a small town if you're ever going to be considered a local, how many generations that might take. But that's absolutely not the experience that we've found here. Yeah. And, you know, like Bianca mentioned, our back neighbours, but they become like surrogate grandparents to our kids because our family, you know, on both sides lives a fair way away. And that's fantastic, you know. And yeah, it's just it's a lovely environment to be in.
I love that, and I love the honest needed adaptation of skills that you've had to learn, or you.
Oh, far out! Yeah, that was the biggest reality check. Like, you come out here, the amount of times I laid awake at night stressing out about like how long grass was getting, or what I was going to do to fix something out there, and realizing that it's all well and good to have all this space, but I've really got no practical ability whatsoever. So yeah, we've had to sort of rely on the people that do to give assistance, and the assistance has always been so readily given.
Yeah, look, there's always YouTube to DIY and Bear Grylls. I'm sure he's got some good life survival in the bush.
Yeah, yeah.
Bianca, was there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think all good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It's been great to hear that. And, you know, I've loved that sort of authentic, genuine journey that you've shared. So thank you so much. And did you want to give a shout out to the cafe that you work at?
Oh, yeah. So I work for the Coffee Peddler. So we've got a number of different locations now, but we're getting a little bit of a reputation. We've got these big, massive billboards on the highway either side of Gundagai. So they make a pretty bold claim, and often we get customers coming in saying, "Oh, we saw your billboard." So we generally hit more than we miss. So if anyone's driving down the Hume and sees the billboard and decides, "Oh, I'll test that out," it's definitely worth a stop.
Yeah, and we've told the peddler's story on Country Change a few years ago. So if you search the website and the YouTube videos, you'll see some background information on their startup journey as well, which is really cool. All right, thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate your time.